Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Midweek Takeaway. Today we're joined by Oliver Friesen, CEO of Guardian Metal Resources. Welcome back, Oliver.
Hey, how you guys doing? It's been a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. How's things? I mean, obviously, some as we just alluded to, summer's well in progress, but a lot of these companies are releasing, frequent news flow, and Guardian Metal seems to be doing exactly the same things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the market is finally turning in our favor here for the junior resource space. So it's time to get engaged again and keep moving. So yeah, Guardian's no different. It's been a busy summer. It's going to be a busier fall.
Absolutely. So obviously we'll look at the recent news now, but I think Kev wants to go back and break down exactly to maybe new listeners to exactly what Golden Metals, which then became Guardian Metals, sort of did. And maybe you can go through the kind of the history from listing and to what you've kind of achieved. But before that, so obviously we saw the recent announcement of the promising results from magnetic and IP surveys at the Pilot Mountain and Garfield projects in Nevada, USA. Key findings include significant magnetic anomalies at both sites, indicating strong porphyry potential. Pilot Mountain, at 1 kilometre by 1 kilometre magnetic anomaly, was identified at the porphyry west target, while Garfield's 3D inversions reveal large, deep-seated magnetic bodies suggesting extensive mineralization. Company is finalizing drill locations and preparing for accelerated exploration, supported by strong financial backing from recent fundraising, which saw the company successfully raise £2.15 million through a direct subscription. Sounds like great progress, Oliver.
Yeah, no, it's been great. You know, the financing that you mentioned is another strategic direct placing with the company. That's our third now. So we've been putting shares in the right hands, people that really support this business over the longer term, and the last raise was no different. So they're looking to support the next stages here, which are going to be, more drill holes into some exciting targets and some development activities at our kind of flagship tungsten project there.
So, Oliver, give us an overview of what's happened since my birthday last year.
Well, I'll even kind of backtrack before that. So just for maybe new listeners, those who aren't familiar with Guardian Metal Resources, as Phil mentioned, previously we were Golden Metal Resources, and that certainly confused a lot of people because our flagship asset, as I mentioned, is what we believe to be the largest tungsten deposit in the U.S. But the way this all came about was, I moved to the U.K. from Canada about 4 years ago, and Nevada is a jurisdiction that I've worked in most of my career. I used to live in Nevada. I worked for Barrick Gold. It's a place I know dearly and have great connections in. And when I moved to the UK and was sort of looking at the different, various junior mining names that were listed here in the UK, I was surprised by the lack of Nevada-focused companies, because Nevada is the top mining jurisdiction in the entire world. So the idea was to bring a Nevada-focused company here to UK investors. If you go to Canada or to the US and you want Nevada exposure, there's probably 15, 20 names, and for a good reason. It's one of the most well-endowed states in the entire US. But also one of the most mineral-rich areas in the entire world. And also, more importantly, once you find something, you can actually put it into production. So the idea was to leverage my network and experience in Nevada to bring something really unique and exciting to the UK markets. It's something that hasn't really been seen here. So the original intention was to focus on what are called Carlin-Type gold properties. As mentioned, I worked for Barrick Gold up in northern Nevada on a 15 million ounce gold discovery there. So it was part of Nevada, specifically the geology that I knew quite well. So that's why we started the company as Golden Metal Resources. We put a Carlin-Type gold property in, which I should remind listeners we still do own. And it's actually a fantastic asset. And just with everything else going on with Garfield and Pilot, just haven't had the bandwidth and support really to push that forward. But with gold kind of sitting safely over $2,500 an ounce, I think there's a lot of value there that the market hasn't really picked up on. But either way, that was our first asset. And then we were put in touch with a group, or there was an asset that came across my desk, which is Pilot Mountain. And I looked at this thing and said, let's build a company around this. It took probably 15 minutes of looking through the data to say this is the one we want. And the reason being, there was tremendous exploration upside. It also, had the kicker of what we believe to be the largest tungsten deposit in the U.S. At the time, I knew nothing about tungsten, literally nothing. This is 3.5 years ago, but I'm going, hey, there's some copper potential here, and I think there's probably a porphyry somewhere.
Have you become the tungsten czar then, other than the border czar?
Yeah, well, I mean, so we picked up the property. And once again, I was really in the weeds on the copper stuff. And then all of a sudden I'm looking at tungsten, and there's a few articles at the time coming out saying, have a look at this metal. There's something interesting happening here. There's very few people talking about it, but I got more and more entrenched in the space. And every article, everything I read, I just got more and more bullish. And I'm going, wait a second, there's a ton of value here in this tungsten deposit. And then, unfortunately, really, it was in the wake of the Russia-Ukraine war that, it became so paramount, and it really, the Western world made a real quick switch there in terms of realizing that we need to support domestic mining because, the likes of Russia and China can really weaponize these supply chains. And tungsten found itself really in the crosshairs. And it's actually timely I'm speaking to you guys because, antimony and tungsten are kind of the main two military metals right now, of which China has a stranglehold on the supply chain. And antimony and tungsten are used in things like ammunitions manufacturing, tank armor. So it's a really important military metal. And as of last week, China announced the banning of exports of antimony to the U.S., which is sort of a big escalation when it comes to this sort of tit-for-tat trade war. And there's certainly a lot of speculation that tungsten could be next. And when it comes to tungsten exploration and development in the U.S., we are, as far as we've come across, the only tungsten-focused publicly traded company in the U.S. And if you look at some of the antimony names in the U.S. on the back of that news from China, obviously, a lot of attention has gone to those names. So we think we're perfectly positioned here. It's cliche to say, but timing is everything. And in this case, I think the timing could not be better. So we're sitting on a really great asset. The exploration is proving really exciting as well. We just raised more money from a direct subscription, strategic financing. So all systems go, and I think it's going to be a really exciting ride here as we continue to push forward.
I was just looking as well, Oliver, on the back of that news last week, that I think the metal ban's potentially going to start from September the 15th. But I saw the listed company Larvotto. I don't know if you saw their share price react to that news, but it really flew. So as you say, maybe if an announcement comes on tungsten, it's going to affect all tungsten assets around the world, right?
I would certainly think so. There's a few names in the U.S. Perpetua is one of them. They have a gold antimony project in Idaho. They've received a big funding package from the Department of Defense. U.S. antimony. There's not a ton of companies who are doing these metals, and that's why it's important that there are companies pushing these things forward because China has taken control of these supply chains. So we're not saying that tungsten exports are going to be banned. There's speculation that will happen, but either way, I think the need to onshore metal supply chains is at all-time high, and that's not changing.
They don't really need to be banned. The US needs secure lines of delivery of this metal. End of story. It doesn't matter where it comes from or who bans it or whatever. It needs its own defense pile, and it sold its own defense pile over the last X number of decades. So it puts itself in a difficult situation. And the other metal you talked about there is interesting because when we visited Ireland and Conroy Gold, the actual gold was discovered because of the autonomy or whatever as you call it, that was used in the Second World War, that was dug out of the ground in that mine. The Canadians came over and then discovered the gold from it. So it's an interesting scenario. But let's get deeper into Pilot Mountain first. I want to talk about Pilot Mountain, then I want to talk about Garfield, and then yes, you have a big gold project because that's why you work for all the metals. So let's talk about Pilot Mountain. What have we concretely discovered since we started? So, the main kind of, the property is centered around what's called desert scheelite. So desert scheelite is hosts what we believe to be the largest tungsten deposit in the U.S. So that's known. There was a resource done on that in 2017, 2018. So we know that's there to a very high degree of confidence. But as you mentioned, what have we done and what have we found since then? And it kind of loops back to the original thing I said, which was when I first saw the property, I'm going, there's got to be a porphyry somewhere here because you have all this fantastic skarn-type mineralization at surface, but where's the actual source? Because these skarns can't exist without a source. So what we've found and what we've done since then... sorry, Oliver, let me just stop you. Just explain to people what is a skarn and effectively how is it created? It's almost like this mythical thing, but what is it?
Yeah, no, you're bringing me back to first year geology. But so what a skarn is, it's a type of mineral deposit, and it's a type of deposit specifically that is found within or proximal to limestones or carbonate rocks. So effectively, it's a very unique deposit type. They're found around the world. They're typically high grade, and they're associated or in proximity to carbonate units, because carbonate units are very reactive. So effectively, when mineralizing fluids get in contact with a limestone in the subsurface, a certain chemical reaction happens and all these metals fall out, and that's how you form these skarn deposits. But as I mentioned, these form by mineralizing fluids hitting a limestone unit. Where did these mineralizing fluids come from? They come from a porphyry. That's the way it is, because a porphyry is a big magmatic intrusion that comes up through the subsurface, and as it rises and the confining pressure decreases, depending on the fluid chemistry of that porphyry, different fluid phases will kind of crack off the top, and then those fluids go through and form various deposits. But like I said, if you have a skarn, you need some sort of causative porphyry to actually have the fluids you need to form these.
So for the uninitiated, a porphyry is almost like, if I'm right, a volcano almost doesn't get to the surface.
Yeah, in simplistic terms, yeah, it's a magmatic body. So it's a fluid, it's a molten body. And yes, some of them, when they ascend, they actually make it to surface and form volcanoes. But the other ones who don't make it to surface, for whatever reason, there's too much confining pressure, they'll solidify in the subsurface. But as they solidify and cool, there's all these mineralizing fluids that can kind of break off and release from this cooling intrusion. So, I mean, that's a very simplistic way to look at it. But yes, it's effectively it's a magmatic body ascending that doesn't make it to surface, and all these fluids, hot fluids full of copper and tungsten and moly, they crack off, and you can form these porphyry deposits. And then if those fluids find a limestone, they form a skarn.
So this skarn that we've got at Desert Scheelite is tungsten, a percentage of tungsten. Mm-hmm. It has some copper in it. It has some silver in it, and you also have garnets, I believe mm-hmm. as well, in terms of the overall workings of the system. So you've now drilled into that and gone deeper. And now what has happened? What have you discovered by doing this?
Yeah, so what we've done is we actually stepped to the south of Desert Scheelite. So Desert Scheelite sits at surface. It's, if you're walking across the property, you will run into it. There's a small open pit that was mined for the war efforts during World War II. But what we did is we found a big magnetic anomaly just to the south of Desert Scheelite. And that was a big kind of key for us, because porphyries typically are magnetic. So these intrusions, when they cool and crystallize, there's magnetic minerals in them which form or will cause a magnetic anomaly at surface. So if we see a magnetic anomaly, we're going, wait a second, there must be some sort of buried intrusion or something at depth there causing that magnetic anomaly. So what we did is we just put a single drill hole. It's a big magnetic anomaly. I forget the dimensions now. We put out a press release yesterday. I'll pull it up. But it's, over a kilometer, 1.5 by 1.2 kilometers now. So that's that surface. So that's a big target. So where do you put a single drill hole in a target that big? We just kind of put it into the very magnetic part of the system. Typically, the higher grades are actually found more at the periphery of these things. We want to just confirm that this is what we thought it was and not get too cute with it. But sure enough, literally from 10 meters, so literally right below the cover, down to the end of the hole, just at just over 400 meters, we found continuous porphyry alteration, porphyry mineralization. We put some photos on our website, some really nice looking visual photos from that interval, of which the assays are pending, but more importantly, confirm that magnetic anomaly is a porphyry system. And that's what we're looking to confirm. And then we kind of figure out where to go from there. But a really exciting development.
And we might not get, as you said, because you've gone for the magnetic anomaly, we might not get amazing results from that in terms of necessarily high grades. But with a porphyry system, you've got such huge tonnage that I presume that the grades can be fairly low and still incredibly economic, because, 1.5 kilometers by 2 kilometers or whatever, and you can go down 400, 600 meters is copious amounts of ore. It would be unbelievable.
Yeah,
millions.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I can't comment on the assays or the grades of this particular hole because we don't have them. And we made that clear in the latest RNS. But, we put out some visuals. So those who are savvy and know porphyry deposits can certainly look at those and make their own judgment. But, the way these systems form is they are very large, as you mentioned, and they're zones. So there's different zonations within, call it the 1.5 by 1.2 kilometer target, which could be bigger at depth. And you have, there's a whole science just around these porphyry deposits. There's your potassic core, you have your phyllic shell, propylitic halo. I mean, I spent many, many years just studying these deposits. And there's specialists and guys who look at these things. That's all they do. And that's who we brought in, actually. Dr. Lawrence Carter has a PhD in porphyry deposits. So when he looks at the core, he goes, okay, amazing. This is a bona fide system. Where do we go next? And he looks at all the different indicators, and it's a very interesting science. But what you said, Kevin, is correct. In general, these are large tonnage, lower grade deposits. So, an investor who looks at a high grade gold deposit in Australia or a high grade copper deposit, sedimentary hosted copper deposit, that has 3, 4, or 5% copper, those are typically very, very low tonnage, which is why porphyry deposits as a whole are the most sought after deposits in the entire world, because they are so big. They're I think we looked at the list of top 10 copper deposits in the world, and I think 7 or 8 or 9 of them were porphyry. So slightly lower grade. I'd say the average grade of mined porphyry deposits is probably around 0.5% copper now, with typically copper or silver or molybdenum or zinc or tungsten kickers. But you're looking for big deposits, big volume, and slightly lower grades than you might find in these smaller, higher grade deposits. But they're fantastic targets. They're very sought after. All the majors, that's what they're looking for right now.
And after that Dr. Carter update, is it right that you staked 16 new claims of ground south of Porphyry South? Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So Dr. Carter, he spent, I think it was about 10 days in total. So as soon as we drilled the hole, I don't think we had even completed the hole yet. And we had him on a plane headed to site. So we got him out there really quickly. We wanted to get his eyes on everything. He spent a few days in the field actually just walking over the property. And that's, we put out a press release a few weeks ago highlighting some of his findings. But effectively, what he saw was actually pretty extensive and very surprising amounts of porphyry alteration and mineralization right at surface. So stuff that probably would have been walked over previously and just missed by the previous operators. So obviously that was really exciting for us. But just on the staking specifically, you walk down so that we have, if you look at our website, you'll see that main magnetic anomaly, which is Porphyry South. But that's just the surface expression. He walked south of that area, and we announced it in the press release yesterday. He's finding at surface porphyry alteration, porphyry mineralization. We put out some of the photos in that press release as well. So just because you have a magnetic anomaly doesn't mean your system is bigger than that. And sure enough, he was seeing some really exciting stuff to the south. And then we looked at the astro data that we had, the remote sensing data. And sure enough, there's a big anomaly that kind of sits just to the south of the Porphyry South magnetic anomaly. So we moved really quickly, and that's, we've talked about this, but, we get these results in hand. We're the only ones who have possession of them. Okay, we got to go get the guys in the ground, get these claims staked before we put anything else, because someone could come and snipe those from us. So we have to make sure that those claims are staked before we put out bits of news like that. But yeah, further ground to the south, I think there's a map. Let me just confirm. Yeah, if you look at the map now in the latest RNS, that's the current claim boundary. You'll see we have really nice buffer around Porphyry South, which is what we wanted.
Yeah, I'm just looking at PM 2402 there.
So I'm thinking myself that the stuff that's actually on the surface is almost like the top of the pyramid, if you like. So as it goes down, then this porphyry, if you like, is probably bigger under the ground, and then comes up to a crescendo or crescendos, in terms of places it comes out. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, I mean, it's what's interesting about these things, Kev, is these formed millions and millions and millions of years ago. So what can happen in subsequent time, geological time, is they can be flipped. So a lot of times, there's tectonic movement, there's full rotation, they're on their side, they're upside down. I mean, anything can happen. That's why you bring in someone like Dr. Carter to piece it all back together. But yes, sometimes they can sort of be the tip of the iceberg, so to say. Other times, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you've got it's all been eroded away. But what's interesting about Porphyry South, and I encourage anyone listening who's interested to go back at the inversion results from Porphyry South, which was actually a 3D model of that magnetic anomaly. And sure enough, you will see that anomaly sort of growing at depth. So that gives us an indication that this is the top of the system, and potentially, we need to go and drill it to confirm. But the inversion suggests that this magnetic anomaly, which is the porphyry stock, is growing and getting bigger at depth. And then porphyry west, we have the 2D data now. We're working on the inversions there, and we'll see what the case is there in terms of what that anomaly could look like below the subsurface. But for porphyry south, it's certainly, and indicators are that it certainly gets bigger at depth there. And who knows what happens below the depth investigation of that survey, which is about 800 meters, but the anomaly is very well intact at that depth.
So when you first came to market, or shortly after you came to market, there was basically the opportunity that we have this resource, this tungsten resource, which obviously has kickers of silver, copper, different other stuff. I think the zinc was a deal. So there was 3 targets that you were aiming at, if I remember rightly. So explain to us how that has happened. Obviously, you've now gone outside of that now, which is obviously the porphyry. But explain to us how that was, because basically the people who drilled this originally were saying, well, we think there's 2 or 3 times the amount of tungsten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what we've done, and we need to put out, there'll be a further announcement on drilling progress. I can't say when, but certainly keep an eye open for that, which will highlight some of these other targets that we have drilled and what the outcome of that has been. So I encourage everyone to keep an eye on the news wire, because there'll be some further updates that will cover some of the things that you just mentioned there, Kev. But porphyry south, that was a target we had kind of all the data we needed in hand. So we were very comfortable going and putting a drill hole into that. You know, the majority, and we've talked about this, the majority of the drilling we're doing is at desert scheelite. It's resource expansion and infill drilling at desert scheelite. You know, the great thing about this story, and one of the reasons why I love the way this company has sort of been built, is the fact that, you know, we have something very valuable at surface. You know, I've been involved with lots of exploration companies throughout my career, and that's the part of the sector I love. But the reality is, if you have a new target and don't hit that target, well, the market can go, well, what's this company worth? Probably not too much, unless you have further targets in the pipeline. So the way that this has been put together, and the benefit of having, you know, what we believe to be the largest tungsten deposit sitting at surface. You know, if we didn't find 1 other ounce of any metal anywhere else in the property, well, what's that tungsten deposit worth right now, given the current geopolitical climate, given the fact
that's the next question, Oliver, that I'll put you on the spot. Obviously, the granite money, if and when it comes, is purely for that asset.
Exactly.
To go to desert scheelite, to put a pre-feasibility study in place so that you can get the tungsten out the ground. That's fair?
Yeah, I mean, all the government bodies, you know, you look at the DOE, you look at the DOD, the DPA3 program, which we've discussed, they're not interested in exploration. That's not their business, right? They're looking at known deposits and saying, how can we help you guys get this into production? Because we need the metal, we need the tungsten from the ground today, not 10 years from now. So all of these funding bodies that exist, you know, the Department of Minerals, the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, you have to be at a certain stage to even have that discussion. They won't even look at exploration. So the exploration is something we're doing sort of periphery to desert scheelite and what we have there. And as you mentioned, you know, we've made it clear we're looking to tap into non-dilutive grant funding for supporting the PFS and development of desert scheelite specifically. So that's another really important work stream that's going on in parallel here, and we've discussed that. So the exploration is, you know, icing on the cake, so to say, because there's something so valuable at desert scheelite, and you know, it's something that, given the geopolitical climate, I mean, to own that deposit right now, what a treat that is, and we think it's going to get more valuable.
What is the metal in the ground actually worth that you already know has been assessed?
Yeah, so I mean, you can calculate what's called an in situ metal value. It can be a bit misleading, I'm not going to lie, because it just kind of takes the bulk tonnage of the metal and times it by the actual price of that metal. So it's a number that I don't toss around too often. Obviously, you need to tie in all the economics to really put a value on a project like this or a deposit like that. But you know, anyone can go and do the calculation right now. I haven't done it in a while, and I know copper and silver and I think zinc have gone up in tungsten as well. It was just north of about 1.5 billion US last time I did it. I don't know what it's at now, but you'd have to take the updated numbers. But I mean, I think it just gives you a rough guide as to what the value of the rocks is. And then it's our job to go and figure out, hey, what's it going to cost to extract this? What's the metallurgy look like? What's the actual supply chain look like after we take this out of the ground and produce a concentrate. So, but either way, I think it highlights there's something very significant.
Yeah, I think if you took 10% of that figure, you wouldn't be a million miles away from the economic valuation of it. Maybe it's more than that, maybe it's slightly less, but ultimately it's going to cost to get the PFS. It's going to cost them to have money put into the ground to get it out, and then obviously you're selling a concentrate rather than the actual metal. So I think it's not a million miles away from saying 10%, which is 150 million US dollars in terms of the valuation of what desert scheelite could be worth. Now, I said that, not you, so you don't need to worry.
I guess that's what PFS is for anyway, isn't it? It's going to determine all that in all those values.
Yeah, that's what the PFS is for. We know the value of the rock in the ground. We have our kind of back of the napkin calculations, as a few of the listeners and followers of the story have asked me to show them. But we have a rough idea as to what this all kind of looks like. But the PFS really, it's a very interdisciplinary study. It takes into account a lot of different things and puts it all together. So we're confident in what we have there, and that's why we're pushing forward with the PFS.
Okay, so the surprise has been the cat in the room that effectively has come on board over the last year or so, which is Garfield. So tell us a little bit about how Garfield came about, and also, how is it progressing? And obviously, this money, the one question I want to ask you, which you're probably not going to answer, but I'll ask you anyway, because everyone wants me to ask you, is who are these people that just gave you $2.25 million?
I can't say. I think in the RNS I mentioned North American focused and strategic. So I think.
Are we talking individuals? Are we talking investment funds? Are we talking, strategic people in the resource sector? What are we talking?
You're always trying to get me.
You don't need to give us names.
Always trying to get me in trouble, Kev. I'll just have to double down. They're North American focused, and they're
guys. I tried.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, so Garfield is one that, if you followed the golden medal story listing to about the first 6 to 9 months, it was the focal point of the business. Reason being, there were some commercial things, some grant-related things that were happening in the background on Pilot that we had to kind of complete and finalize. So that allowed us and gave us the bandwidth to really focus our efforts on some of the other assets in the portfolio. And Garfield was one that, when we first acquired, was literally 3 claims. That's all it was. And just using, our network and our connections in Nevada, from those 3 claims, we're able to get access to more and more data. It just did some really good geological work, and sure enough, that property has grown. I don't know how many claims it is now, but I think it's north of 70 or 80 now. So it's grown by, 20x, more than 20x, which is not just us staked in probably 4 or 5 batches, but every time we staked and did more work, we noticed that the footprint of what we were looking at was growing. So it's a really exciting one. We our motto has always been to measure twice and cut once. We've done that with Pilot and, for instance, Porphyry South. We didn't just go stick that drill hole in there with very little data. We wanted to make sure we knew what we were doing, which is why ultimately drilling started probably later than we wanted it to. But Garfield, same thing. So the magnetics and IP we've done now was a really important final step before we go and drill those targets. So those really, I think, I would consider to be our organic targets developed by the company. A lot of those areas have never been looked at. So it's a really exciting property, and it's kind of goes back to my roots in grassroots porphyry exploration in British Columbia and through Western USA, doing staking and then a bit of soil sampling, a bit of rock sampling, geophysics, and developing these targets. And I've been involved with multiple porphyry discoveries in my career, just doing exactly that, doing the important steps and building this along. And the great thing is those first steps are usually quite cost effective. So we could do it at a time where the market was difficult and money was harder to come by. But now we're at a stage where we can raise bigger amounts with good investors, which gives us the bandwidth to go and drill these targets now. So we're just finalizing, kind of putting all the data together. But it's been, 14 months in the making, really, to put this together. And it every time it continues to get more exciting. But that's what we're doing here. That's what we do with the money we raise. We go and explore and push these assets up the value curve. And then the ultimate goal at the end of the day is to go and drill these things and see what's down there. And with Porphyry South, obviously that's kind of 101. And then there's a lot of other targets that we're going to go and drill with the money we have in the bank.
And do you, how are you feeling about the way things have gone since the IPO? Are you happy with progress? Are you obviously, we've seen the share price move up to all-time highs of late. Are you happy with the way things are going, Oliver?
Yeah, I think I certainly am happy. It hasn't just kind of happened to us without doing a lot of things right and working really hard. And we've got a great team that supports me. Obviously, the share price has reacted positively. So yeah, I mean, I can't say that I'm not pleased with how things are going, but really, we haven't really done that. That's the exciting bit here, is that we're really just getting started, in my view, when it comes to exploration, when it comes to doing the things that really can move companies up the value curve. So, we've really worked on putting shares in the right hands, building this company, structuring it in the right way. Those are a lot of things that have allowed us and afforded us to have the success we've had so far. But we haven't really done much in terms of, and I'm not citing what where we're at now. We've done a lot of really important things and set ourselves up for success. But I think now what I'm trying to get at is the exciting bit starts now, because we have the money, we have the targets. Now it's going to drill them, and that's where companies can really move up quickly. So yeah, very pleased.
Interestingly, Oliver, if you looked at if for instance Guardian Metal Resources had listed in the US or Canada with the assets that it had, it may well have listed around 40-50 million pounds, which is your current market cap. On the basis there's more appetite there for risk, if you like. Whereas in the UK, that isn't necessarily the case. So I get what you're saying. You're at the start of a journey, really, and all of this drilling is going to tell one hell of a story. If any of these projects come out, I mean, some of the gold chip samples that were at Garfield were phenomenal. Though you were in the 100 grams per ton more of gold chips. Is that right? Or am I thinking?
The rock chips there at Garfield, I mean, we had, I think it was about 20% copper equivalent. We had up to, I think, just north of 20 grams per ton gold. We had bonanza silver. So yeah, I mean, if you listed in Canada or Australia, it's hard to know where that valuation would have landed. Obviously, we listed in the UK. We like the market here. We think there's an opportunity. It was a tough going in the market at that time. It's still tough going, but as we were talking about before, gentlemen, I've said this before, but it feels different this time. It really feels different. You're looking at the charts, you're going, it feels different. And so we've been operating in a very poor market environment. But we've done some good things, but some exploration success in the backdrop of an actual bull market in commodities. I mean, what an exciting proposition that could be. So we'll see what happens in the macro. I can't control that. I can control what happens at Guardian. That's all I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But, I'd be remiss to say I don't at least look at the price of metals and everything else going on. And it looks intriguing and exciting. So we'll see what happens.
And one of the reasons why you have done well in this market, I think, is the structure of the shares, which I just want to call on before we go to the gold, and then we'll finish up. Mm-hmm. But you've got obviously a big put in Power Metal Resources. Now, I presume around 45% shareholding, is it now, after that last raise?
Correct.
I don't know the exact amount, but 45% shareholding. Their whole market cap now is assessed by your valuation, which is just bizarre. But anyway, that's for another story. But that can only be, in my sort of back of packet calculations, 30 to 40 million shares in issue that are available in Guardian Metal Resources. Because every placing you've done has been done with people who aren't about to sell, and you've also got the Power Metal Resources. So, from that perspective, this is a ticket people want to hold on to. Can you sort of elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly pull up so just note that these numbers have not been updated. So as of previous reporting, this is prior to the strategic raise we just did, it says 32% sort of other investors. So that would be sort of considered retail. So that number has gone down since then. And the high net worth and strategic investors section in tier ones has gone up from 19% to, I don't know what it lands at now. We need to do the calcs, but call it 24. So yeah, it's less than 30% would be considered sort of float. And then obviously within there's going to be some larger holders as well. And
there's quite a few holding.
Yeah, exactly.
1%,
for
0.25%, whatever it happens to be, and those people aren't going anywhere. So
yeah, I mean, I can't comment on those specifically. I know they do exist, but where the actual free retail float is, it's let's call it around 30% or less than that. But either way, I mean, that's minuscule compared to most companies out there.
Yeah. No, and the reason why I'm saying that is because I just want people who don't know this story to understand what the situation is. So the final thing, I just want us to go back to this gold project, Golconda. Just give us your overview. I mean, I remember when we first interviewed you, we were talking about the fact that this is a very rare situation that we think it's not at depth. It's only got to go through maybe 100, 150 meters of ground before we get to the scarab. So tell us more.
Yeah, no, of course. So just before we get to Golconda, just to close the loop on the kind of the cap table and the share structure, this didn't just happen overnight. When we first incorporated this company, knowing how important this is, we were so thoughtful at every stage as to who we brought in, the dilution that existed, and so this, what you're seeing here, this pie chart on our presentation, that we worked really hard to do that just doesn't come naturally. But it's so important. I can't emphasize enough how important it is. And as someone who's invested in the space myself for my whole career, about 15 years, I've been burned so many times by not really understanding who the shareholders are and ultimately what the shareholders have paid and what management has paid for their stock. In Canada, I coming from Vancouver and Howe Street and the games a lot of these companies play, management will hold millions and millions of shares, but when you really look under the hood, what did they pay for those? A lot of times it's zero, or, they'll give themselves kind of fractional penny shares. So that's really important too, is not just who holds the shares, but what everyone paid for them. Because if you really want everyone to be aligned, if I have free shares and millions of them, well, I can sell them for 2 pence and I'm happy. But if I actually paid for my stock, it's a whole different story. And I'll just kind of finish by saying that every person in that pie chart has paid for their stock, including myself, including my management team. There was not a single free share given. So what that means is that we're all aligned. Management is aligned with our shareholders, which is so important. And every time I speak to new investors, that's a point I make. It's one of the first points I make. I say, hey, this doesn't matter for me unless I can get this company to be way bigger than we are now and sell it or we go into production. I don't know what that scenario looks like, but as a shareholder who paid for the stock myself and I'm locked in anyways, there's only one way for me to make money here, and it's for us to have a lot of success. So it's not like there's, I'm disincentivized or I'm not aligned with shareholders. So anyways, on to Golconda Summit. I think that's an important point. I just really wanted to hammer that home. But yes, Golconda Summit, first property we ever own. It's one that's actually not too far from where I used to live in Nevada. And these Carlin deposits are fantastic deposits. It's the reason why I think Nevada as a state alone is like the fifth or sixth most prolific gold producing area in the entire world. I mean, competing with the likes of South Africa and Russia, just Nevada alone. And the reason is there's these very unique Carlin-type deposits that formed in northern Nevada. Gold Strike is one of the bigger ones up there. It's 15 million ounces of gold, 50. You don't find districts where you can, those deposits exist. Just near to us, there's multi-million ounce gold deposits. Cortez Hills, where I used to work, that's down the road. That's 15 million ounces. So it's the reason why we were Golden Metal Resources. It's the reason we wanted to put these deposits into the portfolio and go and explore them. But the long and short of it is, Kev, you mentioned it, we have very high-grade gold at surface that was trenched historically. But the favorable rocks, the rocks that you actually find these Carlin deposits in, sit below that and have not actually been drilled. So that's really exciting proposition. With gold where it is now, I mean, I'd love to go and drill this one.
I was going to say, sure. So with some of this money, a few 100,000, whack a hole in, as we say, go straight down, no angles, just straight down.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny, Oliver. You mentioned Cortez because I'm reading a book at the moment, this Material World by Ed Conway, and the first chapter he talks about his visit, and he goes to the Barrick Gold Cortez, asset. And he does a couple of blasts, sets the detonations off, and he talks about the amount of rock needed to build. And it's just interesting knowing that you effectively work there. So it's a small world, as you say.
Yeah, no, so I worked underground there. I worked in the open pit, and then I worked in the exploration team there. So I got to kind of see the whole thing. But yeah, Kevin, I mean, do we go and drill it? I mean, I've asked the board a few times. I can certainly tell you that. I said, should we just go do this ourselves? Because we are permitted as well, and it's right off the road. So what I can say though is, we need to be thoughtful about the direction of the company. There's something to be said about not getting too distracted. If with what we have going on, even just Pilot Mountain alone, how do we manage Garfield? How do we manage Golconda? I mean, it's something we talk about as a board often. Is messaging is about where the most value is going to come from. We have something really special at Pilot Mountain. We know that, with the need for domestic tungsten, we're really one of the only players in North America that can be part of the solution. So if I, announce tomorrow I'm going to go drill some holes in Golconda, we need to be really careful about that and really thoughtful. So it is permitted. So the optionality is there, but we own 100% of this one. We're keeping this in one. I mean, very good standing, obviously, and we'll see what happens in the future. But we have a lot of work to do at Garfield and Pilot, and then we'll see where Golconda fits into this in the future. But it's one to watch for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we've had a great conversation, and I hope existing investors who have followed this story have got something out of that. I know I have from listening to your answers, Oliver, and also, if you're not involved in this story, even though this has gone up quite a lot since IPO, you haven't missed the boat here. Have you got any reasons why you think people haven't missed the boat?
Once again, I got to be careful what I say here, but I think just reiterating what I said before is, we've been doing all the legwork, we've been doing all the measuring. Now we're actually cutting. So, when it comes to having the drill budget, it's there. We have the right investors, we have the targets. Now it's about going and tackling these things. And like I said, in tandem with that and in parallel is the actual development in PFS, what we believe to be the largest tungsten deposit in the U.S. And what's that worth right now in the current climate? Well, we're going to find out. But, I can certainly argue that every day as this trade war continues to escalate, it just gets more and more valuable. And it's such an important asset for national security. So there's a lot to look at here. There's a lot of exploration, but also development. So it's a really well-rounded business and well cashed up. And it's going to be an exciting fall and into 2025. So.
Very good. On that note, we'll say Oliver Friesen, CEO of Guardian Metal Resources. Thanks very much for your time.
Great. Thanks, gents.
Cheers, Oliver.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net.